Sultan of Oman television. First, the headlines. Saudi sources announced that Riyadh will make calls with Abu Dhabi, Manama and Cairo to discuss the Doha crisis. The Sultanate launches the second phase of national measles immunization campaign in all governorates except Dhofar and Al Wusta for people between the ages of 20 to 35 from tomorrow. A new United Nations report on Yemen says Al-Qaeda's local branch has become operational in the southwestern city of Taz. And the United States calls for a vote on a UN resolution that would impose the toughest ever sanctions on North Korea. Those are the headlines, and now for the news in detail. Saudi sources announced that Riyadh will make calls with Abu Dhabi, Manama and Cairo to discuss the Doha crisis. This comes after His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, Emir of the State of Qatar, called the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during the conversations. The two sides talked about the dispute and possible ways to amicably solve it. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump also talked on the phone with the Emir of Qatar, the Saudi Crown Prince and the UAE Crown Prince, stressing on the importance of reaching a solution through the discussion. This was preceded by talks in Washington conducted by the Emir of Kuwait, Sabah Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah, with the US President Donald Trump, where they discussed proper means to make balance and resolve the crisis. The Sultanate tomorrow is launching the second phase of national measles immunization campaign in all governorates except Dhofar and Al Wusta for the people between the ages of 20 to 35 and will run from the 10th to the 16th of September. The people in the same group will be vaccinated at the authorized private and public institutions affiliated to the Ministry of Health and all other government health institutions. The campaign is conducted by the Ministry of Health in participation with the other concerned authorities, the phase of which will include all governorates except Dhofar and Al Wusta. The ministry calls upon citizens and residents born between 1982 and 1997 to visit the nearest healthcare center to get vaccinated free of charge. US-backed fighters launched a new offensive today to oust the Daesh group from swaths of Deir ez-Zor, the last Syrian province still largely under the Daesh control. The oil-rich province borders Iraq and is a strategic prize for many, including the Russian-backed Syrian troops that are battling for its western half. The new assault comes with the Daesh under growing pressure in Syria and neighboring Iraq after a string of defeats. The militants have lost more than half of their de facto Syrian capital, Raqqa, and all of Iraq's second city, Mosul. Today, the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces announced that they had begun fighting to clear Daesh from territory east of the Euphrates River, which runs diagonally across the province, cutting it in half. Military operations today were focused in the hilly desert area and northeastern parts of the province. Clashes are ongoing and coalition airstrikes are hitting the militant positions to allow the SDF to advance on the ground. A new United Nations human rights report on Yemen says Al-Qaeda's local branch has become operational in the southwestern city of Taz. The city has faced unrelenting shelling and 2.5 years of escalated fighting in the impoverished country. The report, commissioned by the UN Human Rights Council, which reconvenes next week, also takes stock of the disastrous human rights situation in Yemen over much of the last 3 years. Al-Qaeda and al-Houthi rebels are fighting in a country with devastated public services, home to what the UN calls the world's biggest humanitarian crisis. The report points to continuing human rights violations, security vacuums, and recruitment of children soldiers. The United States called for a vote on Monday on a UN resolution that would impose the toughest ever sanctions on North Korea, a move that could lead to a showdown with the country's biggest trading partner, China, and its neighbor, Russia. The Trump administration adopted a totally new approach with this resolution, circulating an American draft on Tuesday and setting a vote 6 days later. With previous sanctions resolutions, the U.S. spent weeks and sometimes months negotiating the text with China and then presenting a resolution to the rest of the Security Council for a vote. Several diplomats said the U.S. demand for a speedy council vote was aimed at putting maximum pressure on China and reflecting Washington's escalating concern over North Korea's latest nuclear test, which its leaders touted as a hydrogen bomb, and its recent ballistic missile launch over Japan. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who called the nuclear risk in North Korea the most dangerous crisis in the world today, told reporters on Tuesday that the unity of the Security Council is absolutely crucial. Hurricane Irma outer bands blew into the southern part of Florida on a predicted path for landfall southwest of the heavily populated Miami metro area. More details in the following report by Suleiman Al-Bureri.
The window for Florida residents to safely evacuate narrowed today as Hurricane Irma's outer bands blew into the southern part of the state on a predicted path for landfall southwest of the heavily populated Miami metro area. The enormous storm weakened slightly to Category 4 with maximum sustained winds of 215 kilometers per hour. But it was expected to pick up strength again as it takes aim at Florida. The storm was forecast to reach the Florida Keys tomorrow morning before moving up the state's Gulf Coast. In one of the country's largest evacuations, about 5.6 million people in Florida, more than 1/4 of the state's population, were ordered to leave, and another 540,000 were ordered out on the Georgia coast. The National Hurricane Center says the eye of powerful Hurricane Irma is expected to hit southwest Florida and Tampa, but the entire state will feel the storm's effects. Meteorologists say damaging winds from Irma's outer bands were already arriving in South Florida. Meanwhile, France's public insurance agency estimates that Hurricane Irma inflicted more than $1.4 billion in damage on infrastructure in the French overseas islands of Saint Martin and Saint Barthélemy. Officials said Hurricane Irma is one of the biggest natural catastrophes to have occurred in France in 35 years.
And now for the general weather forecast around the Sultanate. Cloudy skies will prevail over the coastal areas of the governorates of Dhofar and its nearby mountains, with chances of intermittent drizzle. The rest of the Sultanate will have clear skies with chances of scattered rainfall over the Hajar Mountains. Winds will be southerly to southeasterly light to moderate, and the seas will be slight with a maximum wave height of 1.25 meters. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. Saudi sources announced that Riyadh will make calls with Abu Dhabi, Manama and Cairo to discuss the Doha crisis. The Sultanate launches the second phase of national measles immunization campaign in all governorates except Dhofar and Al Wusta for people between the ages of 20 to 35 from tomorrow. And the United Nations report on Yemen says Al-Qaeda's local branch has become operational in the southwestern city of Taz. And the United States calls for a vote on a UN resolution that would impose the toughest ever sanctions on North Korea. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsrooms and the studio, it's good night.